Welcome to Joe Stunner Boxing. There was a heavyweight main event on a Dimitri Salita card earlier today. Well, I say earlier today, I'm in the UK, so it was the early hours in the UK, but it was actually late Saturday, 6th of June, 2025. And it was between Stanley Wright and Brandon Moore. Now, this was not a particularly edifying spectacle technically. And I don't think either of these guys is going to really tear up any trees in the heavyweight division, but it did have its moments. If you haven't heard of Brandon Moore, he came in with 17 wins, 10 KOs, one defeat. And the defeat was a fifth round stoppage last year to Richard Torres Jr., the Olympic silver medalist, who's currently being progressed by, is he with Top Rank? I can't remember who he's with. I think it's Top Rank. But they're trying to, build him up as a potential contender. So there was, but, he's undefeated. And at the time, Brandon Moore was undefeated. So it was good to see two undefeated guys going at it. That was just over a year ago, I think. But Moore came up short. And since then, he's had, this was his fourth fight since then. So he's staying busy, which is good. He's not fighting any killers. He's fighting, C-level opposition, C plus at the most. But he's progressing his career. He's a 31-year-old from Florida, 6'6", so he's got the height and the levers, the long range. And in Stanley Wright, he was fighting a real curiosity because Stanley Wright, 3 years older at 34, he came in with 14 wins, 11 KOs, no draws, no defeats. And he was coming off kind of an upset win, really, over Jeremiah Milton, who was 11-0 and was expected to beat Stanley Wright. Why was he expected to beat Stanley Wright? Because if you look at Stanley Wright's, the rest of his record, it is every single fight which he's won was against, really low-level opposition. I mean, D-level opposition. None of them had winning records, none of his opponents. Several, I think 3 were debutantes. So very, very poor opposition leading up to the Jeremiah Milton fight. Yet Stanley Wright won it. He won a unanimous decision, which is why he went in with Brandon Moore as supposedly a legitimate threat. Now, he's only 6 feet tall, Stanley Wright. Orthodox fighter, as is Brandon Moore. And Wright he's got one thing in mind, and that is that he's going to shell up, get his hands nice and high. He's going to walk straight at you, plod after you, get up close and then do what he can with hooks. Almost no jabs from Stanley Wright. Contrastingly, Brandon Moore used his jab quite well, but there's no doubt that Stanley Wright's pressure, as crude as it was making Moore fight probably more than he wanted to, or with a bit more, perhaps at a pace that he didn't like. And he had to use his feet quite a bit as well, because the one thing that Wright does is, even though he comes in the front door constantly, he does make himself an even smaller target by, like I say, he shells up, he gets low, he walks towards you, and then when he's within punching range, bang, 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 big hooks. And that, if you make yourself smaller, you're actually making what is a perceived disadvantage an advantage. And this was paying some dividends, at least in the first round it did, and for periods of the rest of the fight. However, in the second round, when he was coming in, Moore did manage to land. I think it was a left, right, and then he missed with a final hook, I think, as Wright was on his way down. But he landed, I think, 4 of the 5 punches in that combination landed. And Wright sort of tottered over and was flat on his back. There was one in particular, I think it was a left hook that landed on the temple area and seemed to scramble him. And this was right at the end of the second round. And when Wright got up, he looked like he was on Queer Street. He was staggering all over the place. His legs looked laden. He didn't seem to know where he was. Another 20 seconds, 30 seconds, and I think Moore would have stopped him. But fortunately for Wright, he had the time to recover. So he comes out for the third round and you're thinking, Moore's got this. But in actual fact, Wright, again, got himself nice and tight, walking forward. Moore just couldn't repeat the trick. And Wright was, I don't know whether he's having success. He wasn't winning the rounds, but just the fact that he was always there, stalking, was making Moore think. And then there was a clash of heads, and Moore came out of it with a bad slice on his eyelid, on his left eyelid. Hey, look, was it his left eyelid or was it his right? I can't remember. I think it was his left eyelid. I might be wrong. And that seemed to perturb him a bit, understandably. But in fairness, he stuck to his boxing. Again, nothing spectacular, but he was, jabbing quite well, landing his own punches, landing. He's an orthodox fighter, so the backhand was coming over. He's got reasonable power, I suppose, but nothing fancy, nothing really eye-catching, just standard conventional boxing. At quite a high rate for heavyweights, because did I mention these were heavyweights? Well, they were. Quite a high rate. He was being forced to fight at a pace he didn't quite like. And he couldn't really put a dent in Wright again. And Wright just kept on coming. And the cut was getting worse. I mean, the height difference meant that when they were up close, Wright's head was banging against Moore's face constantly. And then in the fifth round, the referee took Brandon Moore over to the doctor, who wiped the cut down. It was too bad. I think it was the right, might have been the right eye. I can't remember which eye. Why can't I remember which eye it was? Anyway, he looked at the cut. It was a bad slice across the eyelid, and the referee called it off. It went to the cards, and Brandon Moore won a unanimous 5-round decision. Deservedly so, I don't think. Or was it? Yeah, I think it was 5 rounds. 5th round, he got stopped. But yeah, thoroughly deserved. I mean, as annoying as Stanley Wright was, he wasn't really winning any rounds. He was just. But you can understand why he stops lesser fighters, because of the pressure, the constant pressure, and he just won't go away. And if you can't hurt him, he's going to be a pest all night. At 34 years old, I mean, he's probably as good as he's going to get. He has a certain level. I'd say he was a sort of maybe a C fighter, C+ fighter. Brandon Moore, clearly better, probably a B- level fighter. So I'd say Stanley Wright. Yeah, Stanley Wright C level, Brandon Moore B-. Brandon Moore, even though he won, that defeat to Torres is quite striking. I think that's his. I don't think he's going to ever be world class, but this was an intriguing little heavyweight dust up. I always like watching the heavyweights. And also Wright came in wearing this enormous thick sort of, I don't know what it was, a skirt or I don't know what the fuck it was. And he had his belly hanging over it. Get yourself in shape, mate. Come on. You're a professional. Anyway, a 5-round decision for Brandon Moore. He continues with his career. And this was on a Dimitri Salita promotion. He's on DAZN if you want to have a look at it. But I don't think we'll be seeing Brandon Moore beating anyone world class. But he can still have a good career. He can still make a bit of money. Anyway, let me know what you think. Comments below. Subscribe to the channel if you're new, and hit the like button if you like the video, because it's free and you're helping us out, and it's always appreciated. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I'll read your comments and answer as many as I can. Meanwhile, bye for now.